Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this evening we have one of our favorite guests. We have Dr. Angela Celeste May. We know her as our clinical, our organizational, and forensically trained psychologist. She is the president and co-founder of A.M. and Associates Incorporated. She is the president and founder of Celeste Productions Incorporated. If that's not enough, she's also an author, a musician. She was a columnist with the Michigan Women's Forum, which the column was called Phenomenal Michigan Women. She was a contributor for the Michigan Chronicle. She participated in an anthology called Stars, Scholars Teaming to Alleviate Racism in Society. In 2023, she was recognized as she was given, she was honored as the Distinguished Psychologist Award through MPAF, and she is the first Black chair elect of the Michigan Health Council Trustee Board in its 82-year history. We are in for a treat, guys. Welcome to the show, Dr. Angie. Thank you for being with us. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you, Kim. It's always a pleasure to sit with you and talk and
Yes.
chat and discuss and solve the world's problems.
Well, let's see if we can solve some world's problems tonight. So let's get right to it. I don't know about you, but since this administration has come in, it's been shock and awe from day one. And what is interesting to me, the town halls that are happening across this country, women across the board are standing up and they are angry. They are having a visceral reaction especially to the men in the room, which is funny to me. And not in a humorous way, but in an ironic way, in the irony of it. And you know, one woman said, and I believe she was in Georgia or someplace in the South, and she stood up, and there was her state representative was there, and she said, or her congressperson was there, excuse me, and she said, "So I need you to explain to me. You want to take away the right to vote of 69.5 million women across this country." I said, "Oh, let me pay attention because this woman, she's speaking facts." And she said, "So you mean to tell me because I got married and because my name does not match my birth certificate that you would take away my right to vote?" And the congressman was just sitting there, sort of smug, with his finger to his mouth, and he had his arms folded. I was looking at body language, and I know he wanted to tell her, "Girl, just sit down. It's done. We're doing this. There's nothing you can say." But I find it ironic that for months before this election, even in 2016, you had Hillary Clinton, who talks about all the terrible things that could happen if this man was elected. Now you have former Vice President Kamala Harris, who did the same. You had the reversal of Roe versus Wade, and women across the country erupted. There were all kinds of protests and rallies where people were saying, "Stay out of our wombs." We have other legislation that's under fire. And I'm just wondering, Dr. Angie, because we understood what was at stake, but all the supporters now, especially women, are very upset. Why do you think that is? That now they're upset? Is this a form of cognitive dissonance? Yes, I use a psychological term and I use it correctly.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You did use that correctly. For your listeners and audience and watchers who may not know what you mean by cognitive dissonance, which is a
Thank you.
psychological term, yes. Basically, anything that has to do with cognition or the word cognitive, it has to do with thinking. So, not just any thinking, but the higher level, more sophisticated thinking, like problem solving and figuring things out. Those are aspects of cognition. The term dissonance, and I'm aware of this as a musician. I was aware of this actually as a teenage musician before I became a psychologist. Dissonance, we see it in or hear it in music. And that means when sometimes you may have two notes in a chord and they're really close together so that when you play them at the same time, it sounds off. It sounds like, oh my gosh, those notes are clashing. And in music, we call that a dissonant chord. So in psychology, put the two together, and just as you correctly use the term cognitive dissonance, it really means that you're thinking something that is discord or in opposition to, you could almost say, to what you're feeling, or you're thinking in one way and you're behaving in another. A perfect example of cognitive dissonance would be if someone thinks of themselves as health conscious. They try to exercise and they really, feel that they're that person who takes care of themselves. But at the same time, their behavior is dissonant because perhaps they smoke and they have a nicotine addiction. They just can't let that thing go. So there's cognitive dissonance there because this behavior that I'm doing, it doesn't fit. It's dissonant to the way I perceive and think of myself. So we take that concept and apply it to your question, and what we're seeing, as you rightly laid out, in these town halls going on across the country, where we have women who were supporters and perhaps still are of the current occupier of the
Yes.
White House and his administration. And so on the one hand, they perceive and think of themselves as supporting him and them, and they voted for them. But they're finding that the day-to-day life that they're living it goes against what they perceive that it should be, because the perception, and this is why it's dissonant, it clashes, the perception by many of Donald Trump's supporters is that he's going to get rid of let's use the quotes, the quotation marks, the bad people. So the bad people comes in many categories, according to the promises made by Donald Trump on the campaign trail before he came into office, and according to many of the things that these voters had hoped would happen, according to reports, according to things we've heard them say. Who are the bad people? What was he going to do? He was going to get rid of immigrants. He equated and equates immigrants with criminals. His behavior and history as a person with a racist record suggests that he equates brown skin, for example, or black skin, quote unquote, with criminal activity. So there are supporters. Does that mean all his supporters are prejudiced in that way? It doesn't necessarily mean that, but they certainly voted for someone who promised those kinds of things and has those views. So when we come back to your question, we come back to these people at these town hall meetings, right? Why are they so upset? Are they upset because rights are being taken away, including rights that can impact women's ability to vote? Is that what they're upset about? These are the questions that I put out as well. Like, is that what you're really upset about? But going back to the dissonance, right? The clash. But he said, like you said, he said that he was going to go after certain things. I submit, my opinion, my view is that for some people, there may be some cognitive dissonance going on, because there have been Republican voters that I've heard some of them. I'm sure you've probably heard them, as some of them as well, who talk about not liking some of those promises on the campaign trail, not liking his negative attitudes towards different groups of people, but they'll like one part of his campaign or one part of his platform. So I like what he's promising, in terms of economics and financially, but I don't like the other. For those people, I would say that not every single one, because we don't know them all, of course, but generally speaking, a person whose values go against the kinds of things that Donald Trump has stood for and stands for, but is willing to vote for just like that one particular part, I suggest that there is likely some kind of cognitive dissonance going on with those people, because within the same mindset, they have to hold on to the idea that he goes against my values, and yet at the same time my behavior is that I vote for someone who goes against my values. That could definitely
Absolutely.
cause some cognitive dissonance, and I've heard people talk about their discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
in doing so. So I would say, just from what I've seen, just like you consuming information, etc., that the cognitive dissonance that we're seeing in the populace more likely fits some of those folks. What do we say about people like this particular lady that you saw? I submit that there is less cognitive dissonance going on with her. Why do I say that? I will tell you. The reason that I say that is because uh from the things that ladies like this lady, from the things that they,
Mm-hmm.
there's no problem with, oh, let's get rid of those people. Let's just kick them out the country, for those
Mm-hmm.
who have those kinds of attitudes. So there's no dissonance there. I want them kicked out of the country. I'm glad to see them, knock them around a little bit when you kick them out. Get rid of their babies too, like some of those kind of
Right.
attitudes, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason I say I don't know there's so much cognitive dissonance with those types, like this lady you talked about, is because they're perfectly on board with that. The anger is that wasn't supposed to happen to me. That was supposed to happen to them across the street over there. I'm
Exactly.
mad because and this is not going against my values. I like it. Let's do that to those people, but don't do it to me and mine.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so there still be some cognitive dissonance in there? Maybe, perhaps. There's a whole lot of prejudice in there to prejudge and assume that there
Mm-hmm.
are certain kinds of people who deserve to be in this country and certain kinds that don't. So I would say a lot of that anger, and this is what people have expressed, a lot of that anger is because it wasn't supposed to happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there are a lot of people who don't come out and say that, but this is the concept that comes across from the things they do say and their behavior, and the reasons why they are angry.
Mm-hmm.
So for that category of reaction, I would say maybe not so much cognitive dissonance. Um, there's a it's a multi-layered issue. So I was gonna say
Mm-hmm.
there's a third
Mm-hmm.
category, but there's probably more. But there's another category I would put some of these voters in who are angry. Another third category, and that is people who, and you've heard this as well, as I'm sure many of your audiences has heard, for those who are keeping up with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Many have said that they've heard some of the things that were said on the campaign trail before the election. They have heard about Project 2025. They've even heard some details
Mm-hmm.
about it. But what do many of them say? Oh,
Oh, I didn't
I,
believe he would do
I
that.
didn't. Exactly.
He was just
He didn't
talking.
mean it. Exactly.
Right. He was just talking.
He
Mm-hmm.
didn't mean.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think for some of those people who really weren't on board with those things and would not have voted for him if they believed him, if they really believed and accepted and understood, like you said, that they've been told this, and if they had done some of their own research from, let's specify, reputable sources,
Yes.
because you can research from all kind of folks.
Yes.
Um, for those people who really do maintain those values and don't agree with that and would not have voted for him had they had a better understanding. Now, for them, there may be some little cognitive dissonance going on there, but for that category, I would say those are the ones who talk about kicking themselves because they
Mm-hmm.
didn't believe it. So some of
Mm-hmm.
the people who are upset at those rallies, they're so angry because they they feel lied to. But
Mm-hmm.
as we have said, many women have said it, many Black folks have said it, and other folks as well.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't lied to, you were told. You just chose not to accept it.
Absolutely.
So that leaves them with wrestling with the mental gymnastics of, did I bring this on myself?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's
Mm-hmm.
causing a lot of pain for a lot of people. And so that also fuels some of the anger from some folks also. So there's those different aspects.
And that is interesting because we're seeing that anger specifically in younger women
Mhm.
who are saying no to marriage, no to dating. I want to have my own single life and just enjoy myself. But it's interesting because recent studies have shown that older women are not remarrying.
Mhm.
And you can contrast that against younger women who are choosing not to enter the dating pool. And so now you have I don't want to say a generation, but you have many men who are bemoaning the fact that they can't find a woman to date and they are struggling. And women are just like, well, if I'm getting married and I take someone's last name, does that mean that will no longer have the right to vote? Or does this hinder me? You know, I find it interesting because what was it, 71, I believe it was, when birth control became, no, abortion. Abortion was legalized in 71. Birth control became available to single people, single unmarried people in 1974. Along at that same time, where women were allowed to open a bank account without a male relative. This was 1974. I know it's 2025 now. I'm not going to date myself, but this is not that long ago. You know, I was alive at that time when that happened. I was a child, but still I was alive at that time. And so I'm looking at it, I'm like, whoa, this is history within living memory. And so I'm wondering, Dr. Angie, do you foresee a growing divisive cavern between men and women because of this? I don't know psychologically if you guys are discussing, but I don't want to say gender war, but it almost feels like a gender war. And I don't even want to bring the LGBTQIA plus into it, but just specifically between men and women and dating. I go on social media to laugh and I see more women talking about, well, I have a cat, I'm drinking my coffee, I'm gardening. I don't have a man and I don't have a husband. And guess what? I'm happy. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Is this like a new thing on social? It is fascinating to see. And then I've had conversations with older women who said, oh, honey, I've done that. My husband died. I'm living my best life now. I have no children to take care of and no husband to take care of. And so I do think that a lot of women still feel um, attached to the traditional value, quote unquote, of what we consider a woman. But again, going back to my question, do you see this creating a greater divide between men and women and making those relationships even more divisive?
Um, there's definitely a divide for sure. In some ways it's not new, but certain things going on in society, like you're just as you're talking about, can make that worse and stress those relationships even more so. I can't say that I see it getting exponentially worse. It kind of ebbs and flows. We've seen this if you go back in time and go back in history books, like you said, living history. It wasn't that long ago,
Right.
that women got what we would consider just like some basic rights.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point about that recent history, if we look back in the history books, this same kind of clash was going on when women during the women's movement, which we always have to say piggybacked on the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Even going back to suffragette times and the modern women's movement, which was in the 70s, made a lot of strides and were part and parcel of why we saw women being able to push. We weren't just granted it out the blue sky. Women
Right.
marched and they pushed and they insisted and they wrote to their congress people and all of that. They worked with allied men as well as part of the fight to get to the point where women were a little more equal in our Western society here and in other parts of the world also. And I mentioned that history to say that those were times when there was a lot of split between the sexes as well. So I would say that these kinds of things, they do ebb and flow, and we see it come it never completely goes away because the fight continues. You know, some people would say, well, or some men might say, depending on their thinking and their philosophy, well, how much more do you women want, kind of thing. It's 2025 and we still don't have equal pay, you know,
Right.
etc.
Mm-hmm.
We're having
Mm-hmm.
things stripped away. There are parts
Mm-hmm.
of the world where girls are not allowed to go to school to get this basic
Mm-hmm.
reading
Mm-hmm.
and math, etc. So the fight continues, but I think if we take more of a long view and we see the ebb and the flow and the times when when this divisiveness heats up and then times when it's less and times when it heats up, this is one of those times when it heats up for sure. But because of a couple things, because of just looking at history with a longer view, I don't, it may get worse to a degree, but I don't see it going just completely, by the wayside kind of thing, partly because of history, and then also partly just because of the way we're designed
Mm-hmm.
biologically and physically, which many people would say the same thing. Tiredness coming through. Although there are a few differences biologically and physically, but anyway,
Yes.
biologically, physically, and psychologically as well.
Mm-hmm.
We are designed to be two halves of a whole. We have a lot of the same kinds of strengths. We have a lot of the same kinds of brilliance and talents. And then there are some things that women have that men just don't have. And then there are some
Right.
things that men have. So we're designed to balance each other out in that way. Let me say, we are complete human beings without the other.
Yes. Yes, we are.
Yeah,
Yes.
this is not you complete me. Yes, absolutely. Um, but I think because of the way we're designed, just our psychology, our biology, and history, all of that suggests that I don't see us ever getting to the point where it's just completely, across the board. Um, Having said that, however, I would also say that there are trends in relationships also.
Mm-hmm.
So taking that human behavior and interaction in terms of our sociology, how we socialize with each other, and coupledom, and what those things look like between men and women. Again, if we step back and take a historical kind of long view, the hippie population, and it was the thing to get you a commune.
Yep.
you
Yep.
know get you a commune again, as we read in the history books, but we were alive, even if we were little kids or whatever. That was a thing that in large part did not continue. We do kind of come back to the traditional one man one woman for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are parts of the world for whom that is not tradition, and polygamous
Mm-hmm.
relationships are the norm. We understand that, but just speaking in terms of our Western world here in the United States,
Right.
anyway. um, so that too, we've seen even in how relationships are defined, we've seen that ebb and flow and come and go. So we do seem to come back to center a little bit, center as far as um, again, we are whole human beings, but relationships that are non-toxic, that might have two people in it, and only two people by and large, for the most part in our
Mm-hmm.
culture, um, and in which the two people are both contributing something to that relationship to help make it thrive, that the two of them are working on together. Like we just keep seeming to kind of come back to home base around that idea. Does
Mm-hmm.
it always work that way? Does that mean there are abusive relationships and horrible, toxic and all that? No, it doesn't mean that, but just that general idea seems to always come back to the center of our culture as
Mm-hmm.
far as how,
Mm-hmm.
how we interact. So as politics heats up in terms of our rights, and as we in our country, for some who may not be aware, their some of the research that you, Kim, are referring to has
Mm-hmm.
also shown that there's been a gender split between men and women in terms of how they vote.
Yes.
Not completely down the middle, but there has tended to be more of a what has been called the bro culture, and more men
Mm-hmm.
and younger men seem, according to some statistics and some research coming out of this last election cycle and last few years, actually, that seem to lean more towards the Donald Trump way of doing things, which
Mm-hmm.
is very patriarchal, very male centered and man first, with women as second class citizens. If we just want to just come on out and say it,
Absolutely.
women are
That's the
second
truth.
class.
Yep. That's the truth.
Absolutely. So as
Mhm.
those things continue to heat up, yes, that kind of thing where women are not down for that. Some women are down for that until they see that it's affecting my right to vote. It's affecting my
Right.
right to, to have a baby or not, et cetera. Then
Mhm.
we do see those rifts and maybe more of them. Um, but I feel like it'll only go so far, to the point where humans will just need to figure that out so
Mhm.
that we can
Mhm.
continue going forward, as humanity. So
Hopefully so.
hopefully.
Um, you've given us a lot to think about in terms of talking about uh the sometimes the imbalance in relationships, whether they are toxic. I know I speak with many women who are moms, and they talk about the lopsidedness of family responsibilities, household work, children rearing, different things like that. You're right. Those are things that we have been discussing for ages and will probably continue to discuss. And you may have new trends that um, may move some things forward, but you are always, you know, moving the needle back and forth to
Mhm.
hopefully where you need to be. But as women who are struggling with some of the things that are coming out of this administration, who are in offices, workplaces, worship places,
Mhm.
just in community outside with other people. And I will tell you, Dr. Angie, it's hard sometimes because I'll be outside and I'll be enjoying myself and I'll see somebody and I'm like, am I safe?
Yes,
Am I okay
it's real. It's real.
here? It is real.
Mhm.
And so as women, talk to us about how we can maintain our mental well-being because I've talked to quite a few women and one of the things that everybody has said, I've had to learn to rely on my faith. I said, absolutely. I said, God is what keeps me sane.
Mhm.
For women that don't necessarily have that, um, what are some ways that we can maintain our mental well-being? Because this is a lot. And if we get sucked into all the things that we're seeing, it can do damage to your mental health and
Absolutely.
make you have all kinds of issues. And I am a fervent believer that we will persevere through all of this and that we just have to continually to stay strong. But we need the tips and tools so we understand how to build ourselves up.
Yes, absolutely. Um, One of the things, you actually touched on parts of my answer already, which is great. One of the things that I did want to bring up also in talking about, in answering your question earlier about, will we continue to see these rifts, and
Mhm.
more and more older women, like you were saying, who've been married, say I've done that, and younger women who are saying, no thanks, I'm good. Um, in answer to both questions, actually, I would remind people that, and we know this, but sometimes, I need to remind myself sometimes as well. Um, the way that social media and the internet is set up, we know that there are algorithms.
Mhm.
So some of the thing, if you look at anything, no matter what the subject
Yes.
is, I have
Mhm.
been one of the things I've been enjoying is just walking down memory lane with some good old fashioned Jackson 5, the choreography. Come on, like I had to be reminded, like, yes, the afros and whatnot. Like I've been enjoying.
Right.
So if I look at one Michael Jackson, I'm sorry, I did but love Michael Jackson too. But if I look at one Jackson 5 with Jackie and them, one video, then of course that's what keeps popping up, right? So because
Mhm.
the algorithms. So I bring that up as a reminder to all of us, both for the dealing with the question of the trends and as well as
Mhm.
dealing with the question of our sanity, basically our mental health. And
Right.
it because of those algorithms, social media does tend to give the impression that what is a kind of a bubble is the whole wide world
Yes.
when it's really not.
Mhm.
So if you look at a couple of those videos or you look at some stuff that deals with
Mhm.
subject matters having to do with young women saying they don't want to marry, just like you were talking about,
Mhm.
you're gonna unless you click away, you're going to start being offered a lot of those kinds of videos, as just as a reminder to everyone. So it'll begin to look like, oh my gosh, is everybody that? No, everyone's not thinking that. Everyone's not that. There are folks who are, for sure. But those algorithms, et cetera, and depending on where you spend your time on social media and the internet and et cetera, it will begin to look like that's, just about everywhere. On the other hand, and this goes to the mental health, all of this goes to the mental health part, there are, by the same token, so many videos out there from people who have a religious background of some kind, and they're really young people as well. They're really raised in that whole, there's someone for everyone, and I'm waiting on the Lord. He hasn't brought the person yet, but I believe in, God first, and marriage is a good thing. And I want to have what my parents had, these beautiful, supportive men. So there's that whole world as well that maybe is not always coming through the social media, your social media, unless you look for it. So that's just an example, example. There's other, but reminding ourselves of that also is important for our mental health, because it also reminds us that there are broad ranges of perspectives, and that there are people who think like we do. Is it healthy to only spend your time in an echo chamber, always talking to people who think like you? Not necessarily. It's good to get diverse ideas and, opinions, and give you food for thought. Like, okay, let me see how you see it. That's very healthy as well. But a starting point, if you don't have necessarily a religious or a spiritual foundation, or if you do, is for mental health and protectiveness, start with finding some like-minded people in your real life as well as in social media. Be careful with social media. You want to try to keep it positive. Try to locate some supportive communities. And if you feel that you are being attacked in some way, or you feel that it's not supportive to you, or you feel that you come away from some of those chats or whatever, feeling really down on yourself, then maybe step away from those. You have permission. You have permission. But finding supportive communities of people and of women as well is very, very important. I say both of those because a lot of times we hear women telling women to find supportive women, which is wonderful. Absolutely.
Right.
All for that. But it's also important to find community, which means men also sometimes who are like-minded, who are building community together. I think both of those are important. I have, organizations and groups that I belong to that are women-centered, and they're wonderful for our mental health. They not only feed us emotionally and psychologically and that support, but you're seeing yourself in other women. And it reminds you of what you can aspire to be. It reminds you of who you are in terms of your strengths, all of that. So both those are very, very important, I would say. If you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of access, maybe, or don't, get out much, it can be one other person or two people. Again, if you're not a very religious person, there are clubs. There's so many options out there to look at, and find things that you're excited about. If you are excited about gardening, there are men and women who love gardening, and there's just so many clubs online you can find women only or whatever. So those things that you feel supportive to you, that help you with community and socialization, because as we know, we knew this before COVID, but COVID really highlighted what sociologists and social psychologists have known for years. And actually it taught us more about it also, that socialization is key. Positive socialization and interaction with other people. Again, I keep emphasizing positive and healthy, because toxic interaction, of course, we know, and socialization can tear down our self-esteem. But getting in community with other women, like-minded women who are supporting you, getting in community with like-minded people is important for our mental health. And then also, we don't want to make the mistake of saying that if anyone pushes back on, against you in terms of your ideas or whatever the case may be, that automatically that's toxic and negative. Not necessarily. It's important to specify that, because a good friend, someone who loves and cares about you, will push back sometimes if they think they're seeing something in what you're thinking, saying, behaving that they think might be harmful to you. They may not be right, but if they're expressing it in a loving way and they really are trying to confront you in a respectful way about a concern that they have with you, we would categorize that as part of your supportive community also, and learning to recognize the difference. So supportive community of women, supportive community in general, online and in person. Yes, you supporting your spiritual growth is very, very important. If you already, so many of us, especially the Black community, no matter where you go, right? If it's Black Christians, they're going to ask you that. Everybody's going to ask that question. What church you go to?
Right.
Church you go to? Which is wonderful. It's cool. A lot of white folks will ask the same question. My Nina Simone earring comes off. But if you're not a member of a church, you still can go and enjoy a wonderful worship service in different places. You know, feeding your soul, and your soul health is part of feeding your mental health. So that can look like religious observances and reading scripture and other supportive material around spiritual wellness. But it can also mean meditating, taking time for quietness, taking time to write your thoughts down. Those things feed us emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, I would also say. Something else too, and that is, and this is really, really important, very important. Part of it comes from the positive social networks that I was talking about, but also learn. This is important to do it for ourselves too.
Right.
It's important to encourage ourselves, remind yourself of your strengths and your gifts and your talents. And if you can't think of a single thing, just, take some time. And if it takes you all day to 2 weeks, start with one thing. And when you can nail that one thing, I have nice handwriting. Do not dismiss it.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not important. Yeah, but no.
Yes, but that's me. That's me.
Exactly.
Yes.
That is me. That's part of me. Let me celebrate that. I love, give yourself permission to say, I love my handwriting, or or whatever it is, because these things mentally build on each other. And I've talked with you in the past about mental habits. A lot of times this is something else for protecting our mental health and supporting our mental health. We have mental habits. We all have mental habits. Some are negative habits that tear us down. Some are more positive habits. Generally speaking, overall, some of us have, and women in particular, have got into the habit of putting ourselves down because of a lot of things. Sometimes it's messages that you were raised with, things you were told.
Yeah.
And then to add to that, like you said, the environments, the political environments that many of us are in now in our country, places, it can fuel that, trying to fit in, trying to navigate, I'm not good enough. So practice saying and writing down. Some people do this, where they'll write it on a sticky and put it on their mirror, so they can see it every day, like write and say and practice thinking positive things about yourself. There's a fine line between mental delusion and saying positive things about yourself. So mental delusion, many of you have heard the term delusion, and it means that you are, just determined to hold on to beliefs and ideas and thoughts with just like no evidence whatsoever. Some might say, well, that sounds like God. Well, those on a particular Christian journey can say that they have what we call, as Christians, Christian experience to hold on to and to point to. So there's history there. But we don't want to be delusional and just pretend that we have some things that maybe we don't. But we want to be honest with ourselves, but also positive. Because the positivity, it could feel like I'm faking up on something, but no, you really do have positive things. So if you're not already doing that, start doing that. Start with one thing and then build on it and start to look for positive things and encourage ourselves as we encourage each other. So I think some of those are the best thing. And last thing I'll say too is looking at people in history. I always go to history, looking at people in history and women in history. One of my favorites is Ida B. Wells.
Yes.
Love her. Ida B. Wells. Yes, she is a Black icon, journalist, writer, freedom fighter who used her pen, used her journalism to fight against lynchings, to encourage and help save the lives of many men and women. But she's
Mm-hmm.
also an icon for all of us, even if you're not Black yourself. She is
Right.
one of many women, look to history for
Mm-hmm.
other women who have fought and won,
Mm-hmm.
fought and won. So we have done it. We can do it. The rights we're talking about can't be stripped away if we didn't have them. Many of them we won,
Mm-hmm.
so we
Mm-hmm.
could win again,
Yeah.
and keep going forward with some of those tools. I hope that are helpful.
That was wonderful, Dr. Angie. Thank you so much for that advice. We know every time you come on the show, you always give us good advice and
Thank you.
good counsel. So before we get out of here, tell us how we can find you on social media and how we can, or how we can find you and follow you on social media and how we can reach out to you.
Okay, thank you so much. You can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. I am Dr. Angela Celeste May, and or just Angela Celeste May, either way, on all of
Mm-hmm.
those. You can find my sister and I. We are co-owners of A.M. May and Associates Incorporated, a counseling, consulting, and coaching company. So you can find us also on Facebook at A.M. May Associates and Instagram at A.M. May Associates. You can also locate us on our website at amassociates.com. Let's see, musically, I am still on Reverb Nation / Angela Celeste May. So you can hear both of my albums on that, and you can purchase them as singles as well. You can find me at Ex Libris for my book, Freedom: What is the Experience of Living Without Negative Self-Imposed Limitations? This is, again, Dr. Angela Celeste May. You can find this book at, like I said, Ex Libris, which is the publisher.
Mm-hmm.
I am boycotting Amazon at this time, but I have not yet taken my book down. So you can find it on Amazon. I have to make some moves with that. And if you type in the title and my name, you can find the book at other outlets as well, barnesandnoble.com as
Mm-hmm.
well. And also I do teach music. I teach piano and I teach voice. You can, if you're in the Michigan and Metro Detroit area, you can contact Mary Grove Conservancy. Just look them up, Mary Grove Conservancy in Detroit. If you're interested in some coaching, I have a couple spots left. Celeste, which is my middle name, you can see it on the screen. Celeste MUS1, which stands for music and the number one at AOL.com. You can reach out to me there as well if you're interested in some booking or teaching. And then finally, as far as some things that are coming up, what's coming up right away is I will be performing in Kalamazoo, Michigan this Saturday at the Epic Theater, Epic Theater in Kalamazoo at 6:30. You can get tickets at the door. It's $20. I will be performing with a wonderful little group that includes my brother on drums. And
Yay.
yay, our brother on drums, and the amazing Ron English, guitarist and bassist. And this is all for Heather, publisher, author, our friend Heather
Mm-hmm.
Buchanan's book. Wonderful book called Victors. It's her latest, and the music and the performance is based on this fictional story, which is based on the true stories of African Americans during World War I. So that's some of what I've got on going on. Oh, and I'll add also, if you can't catch us at Kalamazoo, we will be in New York
Mm-hmm.
performing also at the Artist Workshop Theater in Times Square, and that's Saturday, April 12th. So if you're around, come see us.
Awesome. Awesome. Dr. Angie, thank you for being with us. We
Absolutely.
love it when you come on the show and join us. I hope you'll join us next month for another exciting topic.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you guys for tuning into the Kim B. Davis Show. You know me as your host. You can find me on Facebook. It's not Twitter anymore. It's now X, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Red Notes, Spill, Fanbase, and Threads. Yes, I'm quite a few places. You can also find me on YouTube. So you can see this show at youtube.com/Kimberly Bachelor Davis. You can hear this show on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, Wisdom, and Audible. You can learn more about me as an author at kimbdavis.com. I look forward to seeing you guys on our next episode. And always remember, be magnificent.